Hello, world. You're listening to Feel Good with your host, Malika Lee. Today's guests are Christa Bell, who is an artist, performing artist, an award-winning curator, and a feminist culture creator from Seattle. And my other guest is Ms. Cori Myka, who started her company, Orca Swim, that teaches adults how to swim, and especially those adults that are afraid of the water. And she's been doing that since 2004. Both welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Can we add something to me? I'm a mermaid too, so
Oh, no.
I now identify as a mermaid. So you can go ahead and put that into my bio.
I'll write that down and
Thank you.
include that the next time. I don't know if I'm quite mermaid status, but
You gotta claim it.
That's
you gotta
right.
claim it first. I came in talking about I'm gonna be a mermaid.
You do.
That was my goal. That was my goal to be a mermaid.
Totally my vision of you too. Every time I look at you, I see you diving.
I had a classmate like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was totally a mermaid. She went from
I was
being
so
afraid.
ready.
We just jumped right in. Okay, for our listeners, just to give you a little bit of context. So Christa Bell and myself were both students and graduates of Orca Swim. And so what we're talking about are just some of our experiences. Like Christa said, she owned it. She owned that water when she walked in. She was a mermaid. I didn't have a strong fear that I was aware of the water, but I just looked at it as playtime.
Yeah.
I was associated with a lot of fun. Okay, so the idea is facing our fears. Specifically, we're talking about water. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I wanted to address, especially, you can't see us, Christa Bell, is that, do you consider yourself African American?
Yes,
or?
I do.
Okay.
Black American.
Black
African
American.
Mm-hmm.
Interchangeable?
Yeah.
So do I.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about first some of the barriers of even someone getting into the water. Because my mom would let me swim, but I know for some people in our community and other communities, hair is a big thing, the bathing suits. So were there any of those factors in your experience growing up?
Growing up or now? Not
Or
so
both.
much growing up.
Okay.
Now, well, I wear my hair natural, and so I just put a swim cap on. So
Which
that
doesn't keep it dry.
You have the wrong swim cap. I got to show you the swim cap.
Okay.
The best swim cap.
Okay.
Ever. Because there is one that'll keep your hair dry. And look at all this hair I have.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
Yes.
also
Yeah.
because you have so much hair.
Oh, is
That's
that why?
it's sort of the deep parts of your hair can
stay
so
dry.
the
Yeah.
less amount of hair, the more wetness you have too.
Okay.
Is what
I thought it was my
generally
swim
find.
cap. I thought it was my magical miracle swim cap.
Well, I still want to hear it later when we're done with the
Okay,
show.
yeah. I'll hook you up, girl.
Okay.
So barriers. I mean, I probably depend. Well, I grew up in Seattle, so I also grew up with friends who had swimming pools, and I went to an elementary where the high school. I think my situation might be a little bit different than for because I grew up in Seattle,
Right.
and there might be a little bit more access to water here. But I think that a lot of the barriers for Black folk, for African Americans, are actually psychic and ancestral. And when you think about the way that we got here, there's a lot of work that's going on in the academy around kind of reconceptualizing the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage is the time that it took, or the journey from Africa to the Americas. And so the Middle Passage is being kind of reconceptualized as a womb space, as a space where we were, taken from a particular place. We were in this womb, and then we were born into this new land, completely devoid of culture, cultures and languages, except for what we brought with us, right? And so I think that a lot of, this is just my own opinion, I think that a lot of trauma and reluctance around water and avoidance of water is it's embedded somewhere deeper than just, intellectually, right? It's
Yes.
Ancestral.
That makes a lot of sense. Also, I did a bit of research on fear, and they were saying that just as we, in our genetic wiring, as we inherit skin color and eye color from our family members, that we also
do.
inherit
Yeah,
fears.
I've been reading a lot about that too. We like fear and all kinds of stuff, emotional stuff, trauma responses can be passed through the DNA. So I think that some of that is maybe a lot of it, because so many of us don't swim, has to do with other life experience, or like experiences that we're bringing from the past into the now. And so, which is why I feel like a class like the orca class is so important, because even when we don't know where the fear is coming from, like acknowledging that fear is there and honoring, like really, really just honoring and being in your body and in that place, that's been really important part of my process. But I think a lot of it has to do with past, what we're carrying with us in our blood, in our, DNA.
For you, Cori, what would you say? Because of course you can't see her, but Cori is not an African American woman. And so from your experience, you weren't afraid of the water, it sounds like, but from your other students, what are some of the barriers that they've experienced to getting to the water?
Yeah, well, the big one really is around family. If your family doesn't swim, if your parents don't swim or one of your parents don't swim, they're going to send you that message. There's kind of two things that, let's say a mother could do for her children if she doesn't know how to swim. She could take that child to swimming lessons and make sure that they learn how to swim.
My mom did that for me.
But and it works for some, but it doesn't. When she's sending, that means she has to trust the system. She has to give her child her precious love over to a system that she doesn't understand. And she can't do anything about it. And that, as a mother myself, that's terrifying. And of course you're going to pass that along, even though you're trying to do the right thing by signing your kid up for swimming lessons. And what also becomes missing from that equation is kids don't just learn how to swim in swimming lessons. They learn because they spend time in the water. That it's part of their family culture, part of their family identity, part of what their family does. I grew up in a family that was part of what we did. And so I never completed a swimming lesson myself for various and sundry reasons. But it was part of the culture of my family that we could swim. So it's one way you can make a decision to send them, but there's all these underlying things. The other thing you could do is to not send them, because that is a way to keep them safe. If you don't go, you're not going to drown.
Right.
So both of these choices come out of a place of love, but leaves the next generation missing information and having these beliefs about themselves and about the water, etc. That then that person grows up to pass that along as well.
What is one of the biggest misbeliefs about water that you find more often among your students?
The biggest misbelief is that they can't float. Which we talked about that before.
Right.
Yeah, but that is the biggest misconception. One, that I need to float, and two, that I can't float. And most people can float. Not all of their body floats. There are non-floaty parts of their body. But that's one of the biggest misbeliefs and misconceptions about the water. People always get in the water and they spread their arms and legs out like they're Superman or something, trying to be at the surface of the water. And just most people's bodies don't stay at the surface of the water that way. There's everything in between, right? But there's and you don't need to be like that. You just need to be however your body is, and then understand, okay, this is my body. This is how my body works in the water, and this is how I can move and be in control and have fun with it.
I was just thinking about how I was going to ask you another question. Do you have something else?
Yeah,
I
did want to say that.
Sure.
Okay, so I was being a little bit esoteric a minute ago, but there's also the very real history of segregation in this country, and how Black people were not allowed to inhabit or be in swimming pools, and so, which is how my mom grew up more so, I would say, than my dad. So which my mom doesn't know how to swim. She's from New Orleans, Louisiana. And my father does. He's from Arkansas, but he grew up near a creek. And so I think that's where he learned how to swim. There have been practical barriers to
That's very
Black
close
folks
in our
learning
history.
Yeah.
When you look at generations of a family, it's
yeah.
not that long ago.
No, it's not. Not at all.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, because you mentioned taking swim lessons as a kid.
Yeah.
So did I.
Yeah.
And it seems like there was still a disconnect with the water. So what was the difference between what you learned in the swimming classes as a kid versus what you learned through Orca Swim?
Orca Swim School, you're allowed to just kind of be there, be with it. There's no, okay, when you're finished with this, you get to go to the next group and you get a reward and there's like a little pageant, and it's just very much about, because they had like little snacks if you get to the next, the next level.
Gold star.
Mine was a
gold
patch.
star.
You could earn patches.
Yeah.
I didn't get any.
But I think it's just different. I think I have a different sense of agency as an adult than I did as a child. And then, smaller classes.
Right. I mean, you said that I didn't have any fear in water, and I probably didn't have any fear in water, but definitely what you're saying, Christa, that's why I never finished a swim class. I'd get in, the teacher would say, okay, swim out to me. And I'd say, well, don't move. I'll swim to you if you just don't move. And I'd start, and she would take a step backwards, to challenge me because she knew I could do it, or, things like this that are intended to help you grow. But it just developed, I didn't trust her. Mm-hmm. I didn't trust the situation. I didn't feel safe. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, I'd happen to get an ear infection or something or complain enough to my mom, and I never finished. Mm-hmm. But it didn't keep me, because then I had that piece of my family. Mm-hmm. It didn't keep me away from the water, though, but certainly out of swimming lessons.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting exploration to teach adults specifically how to swim when it seems more common, and maybe there's a bigger demographic of kids that are in this funnel system. So can you speak more about why you specifically chose to work with adults?
Well, when you say there's a bigger funnel for the demographic for kids, yes, but there are more adults out there who don't know how to swim than there are children, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a bigger group there. And there's really a need, because there is not a lot of adult swimming lessons. And most of the adult swimming lessons don't start with the very foundations, with that piece of having autonomy and feeling safe within yourself and understanding how your body and the water work together. And these foundational things, they generally start with the assumption that you kind of know something already. Yeah. And then they're teaching you how to do the front crawl or to do the formal strokes that are about getting people through the water quickly. Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that's really important too, that Orca deals with, is you tell your story, you tell your water story, and you don't do that as a child. And in adult swim classes, you don't tell your story, so it's not present for the group, it's not present for the teacher, it's not even present necessarily for you. All you know is that you have this fear. But I feel like starting off, everyone telling or sharing their water story makes it really present, and there's maybe there's a compassion that's generated in the teacher from knowing just your story, and there are things that I need to be careful of, maybe. Mm-hmm. But it's just so different than standard swim classes.
Right, because normal swim classes are about the kicks, they're about the
they're
strokes,
about, let's get this done, let's get it done,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's very, very goal oriented. Yeah.
And telling your story gives the teacher compassion for you, but it also gives you compassion for you to hear your own story and realize,
and to have it witnessed by the group. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do you have a swim story, Cori, that you'd like to share?
Since I didn't complete any swimming lessons, but yet I still learned, it took me a while to remember how it was that I learned to swim then, because I asked my mom about when I was in middle school. I said, I want to join the swim team. And she says, well, do you know how to swim? And I said, sure. So somewhere between not finishing a swimming lesson and joining swim team, I figured something out. And that was just, I'd go to the public pool. I'd look up in the phone book to call them up and find out how much it was and have my mom drop me off. And I just found this little corner of the pool that felt safe to me. It was close enough to the lifeguard that I knew that they would see me, but not so close I thought they'd be in my business. And and it was in the deeper water, so there wasn't very many people around then. It was conducive for that. And I just played a game that I called Lost in Outer Space. Mm-hmm. And I just had this curiosity in me, and I just said, what would happen if I do this or if I do that? And just moved my body in the water just to see what it was like. Mm-hmm. And that is where I understood then how the water worked and understood myself in it. I learned the strokes when I joined swim team. I probably just copied what somebody else did. You know, I saw people doing these other things and I copied it, and it was good enough to get on swim team. And and then I learned how to do the formal strokes, but that was a bonus. That was a bonus. That wasn't what the real being in the water is about, and being my authentic self in the water.
I love how you put that, being your authentic self in the water. If you all are just tuning in, you're listening to Feel Good with your host, Malika Lee. And I'm here with Christa Bell and Cori Myka, and we're talking about facing our fears, specifically around facing our fears with water. So Cori just mentioned some interesting themes I'd like to continue on in exploring with learning how to swim, and that included a sense of safety, curiosity, and I'm wondering how we can apply those things. If someone doesn't have a fear of water and it's a fear of something else, how could someone use those ideas, or how have either of us used those ideas and in facing fears that we're dealing with now?
I don't know that I've used them consciously. I've been I've had a lot of spontaneous things happen, or that seem spontaneous to me. Like I was talking earlier about, I spontaneously let go of all these friends.
Right.
Because I was listening really deeply to myself and what I needed and what I wasn't getting and where I wanted to move in my life. So I don't know that I've been applying, but I like the idea of applying the miracle swimming method to different things. You were talking about money a little bit earlier. And I love the idea of applying some of the principles to different areas of my life, like really consciously doing it.
Yes, I mentioned earlier in a conversation about applying the techniques and format of miracle swimming, which miracle swimming, do you mind just clarifying for just a moment? Because we've said orca swim, we've talked about miracle swimming, and that may be confusing for some of our listeners.
Sure, yeah.
And I call it mermaid school, too, so there's that.
Add another ring in the hat, yes.
That's the heart name for it. So Orca Swim School is our swim school that my husband and I started 20 years ago. And we taught kids. We used to teach kids, and we taught some adults. And then a number of years into it, we met a woman named Melon Dash, and she taught exclusively adults. And she had developed a program specifically for adults beginning and overcoming fear in water. And I knew she knew some missing steps that I didn't have. And so I got trained with her. So we teach the miracle swimming class. It's a specific course that we teach as a part of our swim school. So that's where the distinction is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure that helped clarify for any questions or confusion of our listeners. So we were talking about money, or applying some of the philosophies of miracle swimming and Orca Swim School to other areas of our lives that we may be a little bit more fearful of. So for me, I noticed that I was avoiding, or it would experience, I was aware of not feeling peaceful. I think that's the best way to describe it. I wasn't feeling peaceful and grounded and centered with money. And I avoided it in some ways, which is an interesting thing, because before taking Miracle Swim School, I don't remember the timeline, but I felt inwardly to quit my job. And so there was a shift of quitting my job, and I was aware of a lot of money habits that I had that I was able to, I'm a saver naturally. So that wasn't so much the issue, but I just noticed that I avoided dealing with money. And having a job where I was getting paid every 2 weeks gave me a lot of flexibility of not to have to manage my money with discipline, because I know I'm going to get a check every 2 weeks. Whereas when you quit, then it's like, okay, that changes the game a little bit, similar to an entrepreneur or other things. So one of the things that I did that I appreciated about Miracle Swimming, did I say that right?
Miracle swimming, yeah.
Miracle Swimming, thank you, was that we explored what our beliefs were about the water. And so then I was like, okay, what is my starting point? What are my beliefs about money that I'm holding on to? And then from there, another thing that was really powerful was about staying in my body and being present. So I remember in a class, Cori mentioned that a lot of people drown just like a foot or two away from the edge of the pool because their mind is like they're wanting to be at the edge of the pool, but their bodies aren't physically there.
Right.
And so one of the things that I realized I had anxiety with money about was the future fantasy. Even though I have money in the bank now, it's like, well, what about, 3 months from now, or what about, and so drumming up all of these fantasies and about something that hasn't even happened.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I used from Orca, I was going to combine miracle swimming.
Orca miracle.
One of the things that I then used was about bringing myself back into my body and the present of right here, right now. I'm okay right here and right now. I have enough money to pay my light bill. I have in this moment, you know? And so that was another thing that was really helpful and grounded me. And then in a very tangible way, these Orca swim classes are about 3 hours a pop. And so before I didn't have time, I'm doing air quotes for that. I didn't have time to manage my money. And then I was like, well, now that I'm not doing these 3-hour classes 2 times a week, I do have time. And so what I immediately did was I carved out the same time that we had swim lessons for myself to deal with money.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So those are some tangible ways that I used facing this fear I didn't realize I had with swimming, and using that in other areas where I realized I didn't have a sense of peace or command in my life.
Nice.
This is good. You should teach that.
How
to use the miracle swimming method in other areas of your life.
I love it. That's great. What are some things right now that you are afraid of, that you are facing or maybe not facing, for those that are listening and that you'd like to share?
For me, it's around going to the doctor, anything, all things medicine. I can do it, but I leave angry and upset and traumatized. And, you get the very kind nurse who says, well, I'm really good at it. I can do it really fast. And they do it. And yes, it was really fast. And no, it didn't cause a lot of physical pain, but I just feel myself being more and more and more fearful. And, of course, as I get older, I'm like, okay, I can't keep living like that, because at some point when you're in your 20s, you can kind of avoid it, And so as I get older, I'm thinking I have to deal with this. So I'm using our method to help me heal whatever that fear is around going to the doctor and interfacing with the medical community. And it's taken me a while to find a practitioner who's willing to walk through with me, but yeah, I'm going through those steps. So last year I had my first blood draw where I did not get all upset and angry. And it took about an hour, but
I love that your doctor stayed with you though for that long and allowed you to have that hour.
Space. Yeah.
Because they're trying to get you in and get you out these
exactly.
days.
I know.
Yes.
I know. And it's very trauma inducing. And I've actually had a lot of doctors who are students, and I ask them about that, how that is for them. And what I hear from them is that it is very painful for them too, that they, it feels very unhealthy to them as well, that sort of situation of just moving people for the sake of taking care of their physical bodies, but leaving their spiritualness, leaving their being behind, and just saying, well, that's not a big deal, or you can catch up with that later, or go see your counselor about that. But
So can you explain or just give us an example when you said you're using some of those steps? What are those for you with this experience with the doctor?
Well, it really starts with things like noticing how I'm feeling when I'm there. And to know when I'm calm, like you said with the money, when I'm calm and when I'm not. And when I'm not, that we don't just press ahead and keep going anyways. We wait until that calmness comes back again, which allows space for a question to come up, or a concern or a belief to be addressed. But when we just push through, those things kind of get rammed right over. So it's a lot about acknowledging what the body is saying.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is one other thing I started doing with money as well. And that was, if I was feeling anxious about making a decision, as an athlete, we're taught to push through. And I was an athlete for about 10 years. And so that was one of the shifts, because I'm like, it's not working. I'm pushing through, but the fear is still there.
Right.
And so I started doing more of my internal work and waiting to take an action related to money that brought me anxiety when I felt calmer or more grounded in that choice. Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you for reminding me about that.
Yeah. And doing it in the space where you have the time to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. It does. So same question for you, Christabel, and I just want to check in with both of you and let you know, unfortunately, our time is coming to an end soon. So we have about 2.5 minutes.
Oh, 2.5 minutes, no pressure.
Right, even though we're talking about spaciousness of time,
I need
right?
more time. I have to feel more comfortable with the question.
I need to really sit with it.
Yeah, I need to sit with it. I have a project that's coming up. I have it'll be my first solo group show, or just me, with outside of this collective that I've been working with for 4 years. That's coming up, and I'm finding that the closer it comes, it's next month, and the closer it gets to the time, I'm feeling like this anxiety, and instead of sitting with the anxiety, I go into procrastination mode.
Yes.
And so I think that I'm super glad that I'm here today, because I'm going to apply the miracle method to like this anxiety that I'm feeling. Like I've been avoiding feeling the anxiety. I have a meeting with the curator that I haven't, called her back on, and I need to just sit with my fear of showing for the first time outside of this group that I've been working with. So I'm glad that I'm here. Because I don't have the answer yet. I don't know yet, but I'm in process, I think. Yeah.
That's really lovely. It's an ongoing process, and we all have fear. And I think the first part is just acknowledging.
Yeah, acknowledging the fear. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not being hard on yourself. Like my mind is, you're just procrastinating, but really I'm afraid of something, you know? And so just really acknowledging that, I think, is the first step for me.
Absolutely. And it's kind of the difference of, when you're dealing with a child, sometimes people can be really tough when a child's afraid, but it's just like dealing with our inner child, with that compassion and kindness. Yeah. And that's something that I constantly work with as well. So I'd like to have both of you share some upcoming things for our listeners if they wanted to follow up with you, or what projects you're working on.
Yeah. Well, we have, every month we have introductory classes and in person. So those happen all the time for people to be able to just check it out, because sometimes that's what you need to do. And then actually the other really exciting thing that we're doing is we're developing an online program, so people can really learn at their own pace and in their own time and in their own living room, where they don't have to tell anybody if they don't want to at first.
So you don't need the water.
Well, you eventually, but you can start it on your own. And sometimes, you need that just to have your own space to start the process. And then you're ready for the next thing when you're ready. Yeah, but can be engaged.
That's great. Thank you so much, Cori. Christa?
For me, coming up is the Every Woman Biennial. It's what I was just talking about. I was procrastinating on. But that's the next project. I have a project that I'm mounting that has to do with spiritual archetypes in Black women's bodies, and so it's visual arts. And I'm not on social media, because remember I told you I was told to get off of social media.
Yes,
my intuition told me. But you can Google me, Christabel, CHRISTABELL. I'm all over the internet.
Thank you all for listening today to Feel Good. My guests, Christabel, Cori Myka, talking about facing our fears. If there's something you heard from today's show that inspired you to face a fear, please, when you do it, we'd love to hear about it. Take a picture, tell us a story, and tag me on Instagram at Ms. Malika Lee. Also hashtag Feel Good, the podcast, hashtag Facing Fears, hashtag I Did It. Yes, so please be in touch with us. Please rate us and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to support the work, please visit our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/feelgood. You can sign up and subscribe and contribute in some way from $2 or more. Thank you so much. And remember, Feel Good isn't just a podcast, it's a movement.